Tell us about the first Periphery show ever at the Brass Monkey in Baltimore.
Wow. Good question.
All right.
So I was on drums back then because we couldn't find a drummer. And we said that it was better off that we play a show, even if it was in some weird format, than not play shows at all.
Yeah.
I didn't play to a click, so everything was probably like double speed. It was interesting. I'm sure that the people at the show, all 12 of them, thought it was interesting as well. Yeah, I mean, it was a first show. It's definitely not the best first show a band's ever had, but it was also fun. It was kind of that moment. It was like, all right, well now this band's kind of a real thing,
Are there any highlights from that night though? Something that just sticks out to you?
Something that sticks out. This is gonna sound weird, but I remember. So we're obviously opening. I remember one of the bands that played after us had a pregnant girl singing. So I'll probably remember that forever. It was awkward.
Well, I'm sure you have more memorable moments from the tour with Deftones a couple years ago.
Yes. There was actually a pregnant girl singing. No, I'm just joking.
Oh, nice.
That would have been hilarious, right? No, that was just the opposite of the Brass Monkey show, I guess, right? I mean, like that's like one of those tours that if you had told me that was going to happen when I was 14, I would never have believed you at all. That was a pipe dream bucket list tour. Deftones have been one of my favorite bands pretty much since I was introduced to them when I was about 13 or 14. And they're such genuinely cool guys. I mean, they were chill. They were just dudes. Like I kind of forget who they are through the day, you know, and then you see them. I took every opportunity to see them. It's free Deftones show, right? If you're on the tour, so I took every opportunity to see them, and then you remember, oh yeah, they're Deftones. They're all rock stars. I forgot because on stage it's like just completely, they're Deftones. So. It was really cool to be able to see that, but man, they're just really chill dudes. And they're really good at making you forget that they're rock stars throughout the day. Yeah, that was an experience I'll never forget, though. It was just very special to me.
Is it crazy to think that this all started in your bedroom at 17?
Yeah, it is, but that's also so far removed, and maybe my memory sucks, and I just feel like I can't even. I feel like when I think about that stuff, like I'm looking at someone else's life. It's so far removed from what I know, and I'm not saying I don't have anything in common with that person. I think I do, but it's just. And I should reiterate, I think maybe it's just my memory's bad. It is kind of bad, but it just feels like a different lifetime. It feels like. That is almost like someone else's story or like a dream that I'm looking into. But obviously it's very real, and that's where I started, But it is crazy, and it's something that I do appreciate. I'm definitely very grateful of all the success and fortune that we've had to get to this point. And I don't forget that that's where we came from. It was just dicking around in a bedroom. Can I say dicking around?
Oh, yeah, say whatever you want.
Sweet.
Well, when you look back on how this band has evolved, at which point was there a tipping point? Like, when did it start to cascade?
A lot of people ask that, and I think a lot of people have this sense that we kind of just broke out at one point or whatever. Right. But from the inside, I can tell you it's been a very slow and steady process. I think that impression just comes from the fact that, to a lot of people, we sort of appeared out of nowhere. Mm-hmm. And then it seemed like once they looked into it, they saw maybe that we had a lot sort of going, and we had very intense fans. It was like, oh, well, that must have just appeared. But honestly, it's been a very, very steady. If there was any word I would ever use to describe how we've sort of gotten bigger, it's just steady. Mm-hmm. And that's a good thing in some ways, because I think we've always had this foundation that we've built up over a long time. And I think because of that, it may be harder for it to fall all of a sudden.
Well, I mean, even the bulb stuff back in the day struck a chord.
Oh, okay, cool, man. Yeah.
Well, I mean, it obviously did in order to snowball into this.
Yeah, I mean, but again, even that was just like a steady thing. and plus there was no master plan with that. That was just fun, you know. It's just all this stuff was just having fun, and like one thing leads to another, and then you kind of roll with it, and you're like, well, how far can we take it? And that's what I mean. It's like, that's where I'm saying it's steady. It was never like, oh my God, like now we're huge and we gotta figure it all out, you know. And I also think that's probably good, because we slowly get the hang of whatever challenges we face. There's no like crazy, like I don't even know what's going on kind of challenges, because it has been sort of something that's just ramped up over the years.
Well, they say it takes 10 years to become an overnight success.
Right, exactly. So, I'll agree with that.
I was reading a bunch of your interviews, and you talk about, a few times you talk about the importance of being fluid and being able to adapt. Is that something that you considered with Juggernaut?
Well, I mean, I'd say that you should be fluid and you should adapt in life in general, and definitely in most cases where you're trying to be successful. But I'd say with the music, that's one of the things where we just kind of do whatever we want, you know, and it's not really about adapting unless it's to what we want, you know, like it's not adapting to pressure. Or, there's definitely a lot of pressure from a lot of different sources, whether it be management, label, fans, friends, whatever, even our parents maybe, who would want to see certain things happen or whatever. But the music has always been something that's been very sacred to us. It's one of the few things that we're lucky enough to have creative control over, complete control. So it's almost like if we don't take advantage of that, we're missing out on an opportunity.
Right.
And that's something that we do very purely. Everything else around it is where we sort of strategize and work. You know, we're like, all right, well, this is what we're putting out. Now let's figure out how best to market it. Let's figure out, and that's where we will adapt and we'll learn, and we'll do as much as we can in that area once the music is already sort of done.
Yeah, totally. I have an interesting question, kind of weird, but do you ever write when you're intoxicated?
You know, sometimes, but not successfully.
Yeah.
It's
like smoking weed or what?
You know, I've tried to smoke weed and write, but you know, the problem with that is like there's a point where if you just go past it, then you just want to play video games and eat pizza. Yeah. So doing just enough to not hit that. And also I find that it's very hard for me personally. It affects everyone differently, of course, but I find it's very hard for me to sort of focus on, I don't know, getting the very basic ideas out. What's kind of nice is after you got kind of a basic structure, then sometimes if I smoke, then if it's the right kind of stuff that makes me creative and not lazy, then it can help sort of flesh out parts or whatever. But it's definitely not something I rely on, and it's more like a exciting, like, let's see what happens. It's not something like, oh, I need some weed so I can write some music. I've never really been that kind of person. And alcohol just makes you think that you're doing a way better job than you are. So like
that's the truth.
So you know, when it comes to tracking stuff or whatever, be like, yeah, that's fine. Then the next day, it's like, oh God, like I got to redo all of that. You know? So yeah, that's not really been like a big thing for me, really.
And you also do a lot of production stuff as well. Do you ever get burnout listening to music when you're not working?
Well, you know, when I'm not working, what do you mean? Like
when you're not working on a record or when you're not writing?
Honestly, it's something that probably a lot of people don't know is that, like, I'm a terrible music fan. Like, I don't listen to very much music. Like, there's not a lot of bands I listen to, and it's not lack of exposure. I've tried. Like, there was a period of time where I felt really guilty about that. I'm a musician. I should be listening to lots of music. But I found that it made me resent it even more. But yeah, I prefer silence most of the time. I feel like I'm so surrounded by it constantly that, like, when I'm not working on it, or if I really don't really want to hear a band for some reason, it's very hard for bands to capture my interest like that. And again, there's a lot of bands that I actually really like and respect, but it's just very hard for me to kind of cross over to be like, yeah, I really want to hear that right now, over just silence.
Well, there were a few bands you mentioned last time we did the interview. The Deer Hunter.
Yeah, I love the Deer
and
Hunter.
the Rice's Visu.
Yeah, absolutely. So. And those still ring true. But, you know, that's what I'm saying is, like, you know, it takes something very special.
Right.
Something very special for me to really get into it. And I think as a result, when I do get into a band, I get, like, obsessively into a band.
That's cool.
Yeah, absolutely.
So obviously this band has become very successful. and you guys have all your ducks aligned properly and you're doing things right, but is there an element of luck to a band becoming successful and achieving a level of fame?
So I'm going to say two things.
Right.
First of all, you say we're successful, but I don't really know that that's true, And I think that's a very subjective term.
Correct.
And I also think it's a bit limiting because it almost makes it seem like there's no work to do, or like it's like we're successful. I don't think anyone in this band thinks that we're successful, I think, and that's not to say that we're not proud of what we've achieved and we're not grateful. We are, but it's like we're always looking to the next step. We're always looking at where can we take this, and for that reason, I don't think we'll ever think we're successful,
Mm-hmm.
And the second thing is actually very interesting that you say that, because that's something that I try to remind people as much as possible, is that I feel like it's not what people want to hear, but it's probably what people need to hear. And this kind of sucks. But I think once you wrap your head around this, everything will make a lot more sense, and you'll be able to manage your expectations better. But luck is a huge factor. Luck is absolutely a huge factor. It's not the only factor. All the other things that people say, people are always like, oh, it just takes hard work, it takes perseverance, blah, blah, blah.
Mm-hmm.
That stuff is very true. But having those things will not do anything for you if you're unlucky. And like, what does luck mean? Having opportunities. If you're writing music genuinely like we do, then it means writing stuff that resonates with people. Like, we don't control that. We got really, really lucky with that, because honestly, back when everyone hated our music and no one really got it, we still were writing it. It wasn't like, oh, well, no one likes it, so therefore we should change it. That was never about it. It was always like, this is our one chance to express ourselves. So we got lucky that people appreciate our selfish pursuit in music, which is all that it is. But you have no control over that. You really don't. And, when people are like, well, what does it take to get my band out there? There's the obvious stuff. Like, you got to tour, you got to work hard, you got to get your stuff together, get a good live show, blah, blah, blah. All that stuff makes sense. But that's what everybody does. What separates the bands that make it from the ones that don't? I'd say that it's the opportunities created by luck and not squandering those opportunities, usually by having a good group of people or a good team, that you're working with, that allow you to make the most of every lucky opportunity and then use that to your advantage.
So back to what you were saying, what is your definition of success then?
I think definition of success is probably a point where you could rest on your laurels, and I don't know
when you're 40.
Or when you if you make it to 40, you're a success. I don't know. I think that if I were to define it, it wouldn't resonate with anyone else. I think it's a subjective term by nature, and everyone will have their own opinion. But my opinion is that it's when you can sort of rest on your laurels and you don't have to worry about anything. And that could be cool, but that also is like not exciting. And I don't know if I would ever get to that point. I feel like no matter where we were, there would always be sort of the next step. There's always a next step. And that's exciting because, it's not having these achievements that's exciting to me. It's as they say, it's the journey. It's like working through them. That's the exciting part. And we all enjoy that. So that's why as soon as like we're done with something, it's like, all right, cool. Take a day to be happy about it. And then the next day it's like, all right, well, where do we go from here?
So the actual process of doing it and not the end result.
Absolutely.
I usually ask people for advice to younger musicians, but all of your advice is on the internet. So let me ask you this. What do you wish someone would have told you when you were 17?
Honestly, it's not going to be what you expect.
That's fine.
Pick one guitar. Pick one tuning. Stick with it. We're facing like the logistical nightmare because we just play with so many tunings, and that's actually not even a serious thing because I like being able to write on whatever I want to write. I don't know. Maybe manage your expectations. Like that's a very good one, because I think if you do that, you can stay grounded and you can never expect. And also managing your expectations, I think, also comes a lot from being able to sort of visualize the other side of whatever argument you're on or whatever conflict you're having, like whether it's a negotiation or whatever. I think if you can understand what the other party's side is, then it makes it a lot easier to see what a realistic middle ground would be, and that helps you manage what a good outcome for both parties would be. But yeah, like I think that's a good one.